This is my piece of muslin fabric. When you buy fabric, it's on the roll, it's folded in half, and then you have to take it and you have to roll it off and cut it to the size and width, the length and the width that you want it to be. So the best thing to do is cut off 1 yard or half a yard. I would say just cut off 1 yard of fabric, cut that in half along the length of the muslin. Once you cut that in half, then take half of that half and fold it in half again, and that will probably give you the 2 panels you need to drape the front and back bodice. Again, you cut off 1 yard of muslin, and since the muslin is folded in half, you know you'll have to cut it again on the length, and then take that one piece and fold it in half lengthwise and cut it again, and that will give you a front and back panel piece. These dress forms are a size 8, and I believe that will be enough for you to be able to drape the front and back muslin. Okay, I know that I'm not doing the extended bodice. I'm only doing the waist bodice, so I'm going to cut my fabric a little bit shorter, and I just want my fabric to be nice and neat. So this is my piece of muslin after I cut it off the roll. So I cut it off the roll, and as you can see on this edge, I cut it again on the length. So I've got another piece like this, and then I took this piece and just folded it in half. Now the thing you have to do is make sure that this piece is straight. That's very important. So this edge here, this is the selvage. You can tell by how neat and tight it is here. So use that to line up and make sure that your fabric is straight before you do the next part. So what I have here in my hand is my seam ruler, and what it is just if you are working and you don't have your iron, or you don't want to go over to your iron right away, you can use this to press your seams open just like this. Okay, and it does a pretty decent job. This is just a little inexpensive one, and I had in my toolbox, and I thought I'd just bring it to my work table and start to use it. Okay, so just make sure that you have your fabric straight. Now again, I know that the length of my form is shorter than this. It's not this long. Again, we want to make sure this is straight, and so I'm going to cut this off. So I'm going to take my square ruler and lay it here. Again, I'm making sure that I'm cutting along on the cross grain, but that my ruler is straight on here. And now I'm going to just make me a line so I can cut it here. And so I'm coming up here. You guys can't see that, can you? Wait a minute, let's come down a little bit so you can see. There we go. And so now, see how I've got this back part here of my square against the straight edge of the fold? And so if I have this against the straight edge of the fold, I know this part is straight. So now I'm going to just make my line. I'm going to cut away this excess here at the top. And so I can go ahead and do that. And I've been using these scissors to cut things I shouldn't, and I can tell. So I am going to have to get these serviced soon. Okay, so got that part, and I want to do the same thing here on the other end before I cut the 2 panels apart. So I'm going to go down here. I know that this edge here is 24 inches long, and so if I put this here, I know that that's 24 down at this end, and I know that should be enough, so I'm going to put a little mark there. And then I'm going to flip my square over, and again make me another nice little line. It's very important that you have all your tools gathered, that your tools are right available for you to use, and before you start working. And then once I do that, then I can go ahead and cut that apart too. Then I don't think I'm going to use my square anymore for a moment, so I'm going to put it aside for a second. Okay, and I'll go ahead and cut that. So when I'm cutting, I'm trying to make sure I don't have any jagged edges. I want it to be nice and smooth. Okay, so now that I have done that, I've got my panels here. Now this fold here, I don't need it anymore. Okay, this fold, I can take this apart, and I have my front and my back piece here. So I can go ahead and cut these two apart. Now if you do have to press your muslin, you know you can press it with an iron. Make sure that you don't use steam, because at this point you've done your measuring. You don't want to shrink the muslin, you just want to get the wrinkles out. Now the cool thing about muslin, if you want to make sure that the end is straight, is if you clip it a little or tear it a little on the end, because it only has the threads going straight, like you see that little piece of thread there, and going across. If you pull it here and tear it, it will naturally tear straight. See? Tearing straight on the line. Okay, so that's why I love muslin. It takes some of the work out of making samples. Okay, so now I've got my two panels here, one for the front and one for the back. All right, so we'll put one aside because we're going to do the front first. All right, so the first thing we're going to do here is take our follow the directions in the book, and you're going to need your clear plastic ruler. You're going to need a marker here in order to do this, and of course you need your measurements. All right, so you're going to, every time these next few things you're draping for your front or bodice, every time you're draping, period, these things, until you get to be a master at this, you're going to do these things. You're going to prepare your muslin panel, make sure that you have the right width and the right length of that you need, but you're also going to make sure that you mark your cross grain and your straight grain. Now the easiest way to mark the straight grain is, remember that the straight grain runs parallel to the selvage. This is the selvage edge. So I want to mark my straight grain and fold this selvage under. So what I'm going to do is take my ruler, and this ruler is a 2-inch wide ruler, and so it's 2 inches wide this way. So right up the center part here is the division between the two, and I'm just going to lay this against here right at that edge and mark my 1 inch from the selvage, which is my grain line. Okay, I do it all the way up to the edge there. Just hold your ruler, and I want to keep going all the way down to the end here. And again, all I'm doing is, you can see I've got half the ruler, half on and half off there. Okay, so I'm just marking my 1 inch from my grain line, 1 inch from the selvage. Okay. Once I have done that, and again, this is the question I'm asking you is, how do you prepare your muslin for the drape? This is what I'm asking you. You get your fabric, and then you mark 1 inch from the selvage edge, fold that under. You can press it if you feel like you need to. Again, you'll be pressing without steam. You're not trying to shrink the fabric, you're just trying to make this neatly under, and right on that line I'm folding that under. Okay, and this is going to help me when I go to drape on the form, because this is my grain line as well, and I know it's straight because the selvage is straight. Okay, so that's the first thing you do. All right, so if you want to, you can get you one of these trusty little buddies here if you like. I like to think it works. And just give it a little roll here. Okay. Now, if you follow the directions from the text, the next thing that you're going to do is mark. First, let's talk about what this is. This is the top of your drape here. You guys, let me make sure you can see that. This is the top of your drape. Okay, this area here. So if you follow the text, and keep in mind you're going to do this every time you're draping for the front and the back. The measurements at the neck are different, but remember this is the top. So the next thing we're going to do is mark our the neck, basically. So we're going to measure down from the top, okay, which would in essence be the shoulder. We're going to come down 4 inches. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 inches, and then we're going to mark that there. Okay, 4 inches there. All right, and again, this is something we're going to do every time we're going to we're preparing to drape. And so we're going to go in and another at the shoulder, 1 3/4, okay, here at the shoulder. And what we're doing again is going to help us when we get to the form. So 1 3/4. So we'll come here. Make sure you guys can see that. And that's 1 inch. And so that's 1, 2, and 3/4. Okay, so we'll put a mark here. Here where I have my where I marked for the neck, where it came down to 4 inches, I'm going to come in 3/8 of an inch and put a little X there. That's 1, 2, 3. That's 3/8. Put a little X there. Okay, so I'm going to go over it once again before I move on to the next part. The first thing I did was cut my panels apart so that with my muslin, so that I could make sure I had 2 pieces. Then I marked 1 inch away from the selvage line, the whole length of the panel, and then once I did that, I measured down from the top 4 inches, marked that, and measured in 3/8 of an inch and put an X there. Okay, 3/8, and then at the top here I measured over 1 3/4 inches, and I'll put this here and I marked that. Again, this is to help you when you put the fabric on the form for the first time. Okay, all right, so now that we've done that, the next thing that we're going to do is mark our bust depth. Okay, now that's, again, these are measurements you should already have taken. Remember, once you get to where you're this part, you have already prepared your form, so you shouldn't be doing anything math wise at this point, or taking any measurements. You should just have a sheet with the measurements on it that you can just glance over and then mark it on the fabric. All right, so the bust depth, remember that measurement is taken from the center right up underneath your chin there down to your bust line. On the form, right in the center neck down to the bust line. Okay, so I've got my form right here, and so I can just look and see where it is. And it's just like here. It's right there. Okay, so now that is my bust depth. Okay, but that's not right, because that would be all the way, I'm sorry, that is right, but that's not what I want to do. I want to make sure that once I mark my bust depth, that I also include the shoulder. Okay, so that would be from the top here, so I've got to make sure that I get that measurement right, and usually that's about 10 inches on the average woman, the bust depth. Okay, so I would measure up here from the shoulder. Make sure you guys can see. I'm sorry about that. I took that measurement wrong. It should be from your shoulder, just like you normally would. From the shoulder up here down to your bust line. And let me see if I can get the camera to turn. There we go, so you can see better. Okay, so from the shoulder down to the bust line. And I'll show you why you need to have a red pen, a blue pen, and a black pen, so when you make a mistake, you got your red pen. My red pen, it doesn't want to work. There you go, and you can just cross out with the red pen so you don't get confused and think with your markings here. Now I've got plenty of red pens. There you go. All right. All right, so again, let me make sure that after you mark your measurements here, 4 inches down and in 3/8 of an inch, and then you mark across here 1 3/4 and mark, then you will come to your shoulder and mark your bust depth, and that's going to be from your shoulder all the way down to your bust line. Again, on the average woman, that's about 10. I want you to use your bust form, and on the bust form, it's about between 9.5 and 10 for a size 8 form. So I'm going to mark that here, and that's what I'm going to use for my cross grain line. Okay, so that works out great. So I'm going to take my ruler and line it up against the straight edge here of the center front. Okay, because that's the center front, right? Put CF there so you know. Okay, and then I'm going to draw my line straight across. This is my cross grain line. Remember that we always want to stay on the straight grain. If we're off grain, we want to be aware of it. In this case, we have not started designing. We're just draping our first project, so we want to be on the, make sure we're on the straight of the grain. All right, so now I've got my and I'm going to take this all the way over. Okay. All right, so I've got my cross grain. Okay, so now that I've done that, my front piece is ready for me to start to drape. Okay, so now that that's happened, all I really need are my pins, and we talked about pins kind of pens we should be using. We talked about marking the form, and we talked about marking and preparing the fabric. Okay, so today I want you guys to make sure that you understand that every time you start a draping project, for the next few projects, you're going to be going through this same preparation here. You're always going to prepare the form, prepare your fabric, okay? And you're always going to need those reference points on your form. The reference points on your form will always be there. They are different from your measurements on there. If you look at the text and actually look at the list of reference points, you notice that you need those reference points before you take the actual measurements. The reference points, if you mark those first, it makes it easier for you to take the measurements and mark the measurements on the body or on the form. Okay, so usually with pattern drafting, draping, and anything pertaining to drafting or doing this kind of work, there is a method and there are steps that support one another. So you can't just dive in and start doing something. It will be easier. One step supports the step the next step after it. So don't try to skip through this, because your work will reflect it. So now, just a quick review. You get your fabric. Okay, you take 1 yard of fabric, cut that fabric in half, okay, and then take a piece, that one of the pieces you have cut in half, fold that in half, cut it in half. You end up with 2 panels like I have here. So I've worked 1 panel here, and here's my panel I'm going to use for the back. It's ready. And when I get ready to do the back, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to measure over 1 inch from the selvage, fold it under, okay, measure down, mark, measure in, mark, and then I'm going to drape the back. Okay, I'm going to mark my cross grain, and I'm going to be ready to drape the back. All right, so you cannot get past this. This has to be done. All right. Okay, I hope this little short video here helps you along with the text in preparing to drape. I'm going to have you guys submit a photo of your fabric prepared before you start to drape, so that we can make sure we all are on the same page with this. If we can get past these must-dos here, then we can get into the creative part of draping, which I think you will find is very, very, very intriguing and exciting. Have a good one.